Carolyn at our piano has perfect pitch. So when the piano gets out of tune, she hears it. And if it's getting more out of tune, she says, I think we need the tuner in. So we get the piano tuner, we get it back in tune, and when it's getting even voiced, the piano, I learned that from her, then it's gonna be okay again. So what do we do when we are out of tune and need to be aligned and live more attuned to Jesus? Another example, there are some people who have AFib, like the heart is not quite in sync, or they have a heart racing. Something is not okay with them. So they go to the cardiologist, they get a pacemaker or get kind of some medication that may help, or they get their heart zapped or shocked back into rhythm. So there is a remedy when your heart is out of tune. What do we do when our lives are out of tune, when we kind of don't align as much to Jesus? And how do we even know that we're out of tune? Well, from my experience, it is when there is friction, when you feel like with those wheels of the car, you're burning a lot of rubber, when you feel like burning out, when you feel like down or exhausted, or you feel like stuck in a place. One thing we just heard from the children, when I think of children, they're never stuck in a rut. They're always somehow flexible, flowing, and so on, and I think that's one of these things. When we are stuck, when we're you hear like the fingernails on a blackboard. That's how I imagine something is got to happen there, something to get realigned. And this very scripture reading that we heard has this one passage, has this one verse, and it was one of my grandma's favorite verses, especially after her husband, my grandpa, died. She was really down, she felt exhausted, she felt just frustrated. The passage, come to me, Jesus invites us, everyone who is dealing with some stuckness, with something that's not quite right. Come to me. Ye who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. There is something to not being alone in this. And then Jesus uses this image of a yoke. Now, what is a yoke? A yoke ties two animals together. Usually it's around their neck. You can yoke mules, you can yoke oxen, you can yoke even goats. Some did that. And it's kind of, you're not on your own in it. If you would be on your own in a yoke, you would be totally misaligned and you would carry all the burden. So being in a yoke with Jesus means you're not walking alone. Someone is walking with you in that rhythm, in that groove, in that place where you live aligned with Jesus. And when you see me wearing a stole on Sundays, on Communion Sundays, that stole is a symbol of being yoked with Jesus. So the yoke, the stole, being together with Jesus in it. That's the calling I'm following, that I try to live in. So how does that become visible to or audible to you and me? I remember Alva Deans, sitting with him on the sofa and reflecting with him. Alva was so very concerned of his loving wife Dot. And Alva said he worried about her. All he wanted is live one day longer than his wife. Why? He cared so much for her. He wanted to take care of her. And Alva was struggling himself with health concerns. They were all in their 90s. Both of them were in their 90s. So Alva said, when I sit there on the sofa, paying close attention, I can hear, I can tune in, I can sense Jesus' message. Do not worry. It's gonna be okay. Alva could worry and fret and scratch the house and be all over the place. But he said, that doesn't give me enough. I can't do it all. So he relaxed into grace, opening up his heart to the message of Jesus. It's gonna be okay. You don't have to worry. And he could feel and sense that presence in his life. The other thing that we can do is realize that we're not alone in it. We have friends. We have groups like our prayer shawl group. There is something so beautifully happening there. A sharing of joys, of concerns, of playfulness, true community, where you realize it's gonna be okay. And they're with one another in and through the ups and the downs. And I know many of you have a best friend. You have been together for many years, and you know you're loved no matter what. To have someone with whom you can share, someone you trust, someone who is right there with you when you're struggling, when you're frustrated, when you're dealing with questions, and someone who is listening not to fix you, someone who is listening without judgment, someone who's just present with you and reflecting back, listening what they hear you say. And the third, and I think that's what church is about too. And I think what would help us overall as individuals and as a community if we form like life support groups. Don't think of it as grief support, but as just life support. Share our joys, our ups, our downs, and be together in it. And the third thing that I think from the scripture, how we can learn from Jesus is when we relax into grace, when we somehow can let go a little bit more. In a recent meeting, one of the sweet, sweet ladies and caring persons of St. Paul said, Dietmar, can you stop micromanaging everything? I thought, okay, what is that about? So I try things to be right. I'm somehow a recovering perfectionist. I try to work hard, prepare well, and have it all ducks in an order. And sometimes I'm worrying here about, do we follow every step? Is it all aligned? Is it all? So I'm more worried and tied up rather than kind of let a little bit more go with the flow and be present to respond to just what is right here and now. Now, will I ever be all loosey-goosey, fly by the seat of your pants? I will not. But you see a little bit of balance there, rather than being too tight, too narrow, I gotta get this right. And adding the part to, okay, it's okay to relax into grace. It's okay to breathe a few times deeply and kind of knowing deep down it's gonna be okay. Softening up. Sigrid is going to physical therapy. She has issues with her heel and her leg. And you know what the massage therapist does? Wherever it's getting too tight, that's where she presses and massages, and where she's kind of, ouch, it hurts to actually get all that work done there. So I think a little bit in a similar way, where we are getting too tight, too worked up, that's where Jesus wants to touch us and work on us to help us let go and trust more. So is it that your heart and soul connection with Jesus, knowing you're yoked together, you're not on your own? Is it that you have a friend, someone you can share with whatever is on your heart? Is it that you just relax into grace? Those are three ways how you and I can live more in tune with Jesus, how we can more align with Jesus. Which part speaks to you? How do you live more in tune with Jesus?